Alright, everyone. This is a video, a very opinionated, I shall say, pretty much facts video about which states I don't like and the ones that I do like. Okay, so now I've been traveling here and there for 22 years. I've been to every single state except for Hawaii. One thing that I've noticed through my travels is if you go to an area filled with drug addicts and drug dealers that have aged terribly, like if you go into a homeless shelter in that town, usually they'll either, for one, they won't serve, they serve unhealthy food, and or they joke about putting bad stuff in your food, and or they just straight up put bad stuff in your food. Okay, so now in that movie called Blow, that federal prison was in Danbury, Connecticut. I was in that homeless shelter in that town. I've never been to prison, but I've been to jails, psych wards, and state hospitals, locked up there and in those places. And so in that movie Blow, George says that he went into prison with a master's in marijuana and came out with a PhD in cocaine. I was at that shelter in Danbury, and that was a college on how to commit crimes. And so you had like washed up drug dealers there, you know what I'm saying? And so one time they put something bad in my food. I know they did because like all of a sudden I got real sick, and then I threw up. And then even when I threw up, the staff member at the shelter, when I threw up at the shelter, he wanted me to clean up the mess, which they were a cause of, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so that was in Connecticut, so we don't represent for Connecticut. Hell no. Okay, when I was in the state of Washington, in a town called Bellingham, Washington, which is by the Pacific Ocean and the Canadian border, I've been around that block about, I would say, around 3 times. And I think it was like every single time. I don't think they actually did this, at least that I could tell. But like every time I was around that block, there would be somebody that would joke about and or have their suspicions that somebody messed with that food. You know what I'm saying? And almost every single case, if not every single case, somebody joked about that. They had a smirk, like an evil smile on their face, as if it was fucking funny. And I know in British Columbia, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, that's where Mark Emery lived or was from or whatever. And he had this major marijuana seed bank company called Emery Seeds. His name is Mark Emery, and he eventually got 5 years in prison, and he served that time in America for selling those seeds. And so they're really into drugs back and forth across that Canadian border on both sides of it. And so we don't represent for Washington either. In Southern California, they would feed us like small portions of food, and then they would give us unhealthy food, and so like they gave us like unhealthy food, like sugary stuff, and being the fact that we didn't have much to eat, we would eat the sugary stuff too. And they had this frosted flakes, and you couldn't tell where they came from because it was in a cellophane bag without hardly any descriptions about where it came from. And these Frosted Flakes were as crunchy as glass. And one time I got this Frosted Flake stuck in between these two teeth, and I went to pick it out, and it chipped the inside of the inward tooth, and then that one corroded down to a stub, and then it corroded the inside of the outward tooth right there. This one that looks like a fang. You know what I'm saying? So we don't represent for California for that, and for other reasons. I've had some of the absolute worst shit ever happen to me only after coming to California. So we don't represent for California. California love? Hell no, we ain't down for California. So as that YouTube channel Legion of Men says, when people do you wrong, you say to yourself and everybody else in the whole world, next. Okay, so let's see here. In Kansas, in my hometown where I'm from, Wichita, Kansas, I've heard that they allow some inmates to serve the food, and they would like jack off in the food, you know, put bad stuff in the food. And then later, when I went to this Job Corps Center in Flint Hills, Kansas, which is next to that college town, Manhattan, Kansas, there was this dude. You could tell he did drugs because his face looked like freaking like a meth lab fucking blew up in his face. And he talked about how when he was in jail or prison, I think it was in jail, in either Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri, that they would put bad stuff in his food, and he would say that's why you got to eat your food. You got to eat food that's actually dry. Okay, and now let's talk about this town called Davenport, Iowa. That's where I heard, after I went there, there's this thing called eugenics, where they did some genetic experiment on people, on humans. And I don't know what experiment they did, but it must have gone haywire, because most everybody in that town looks weird. And I found this one book called, it's either Grain Brain and or Wheat Belly, which will tell you bagels are the absolute most unhealthy wheat product for you. And I think it's in the book called Wheat Belly and or the book called Grain Brain, which will tell you wheat in general is bad for 85% of the world's population. I know it's bad for blood type O's because of the gluten. Okay, and so there's different kinds of unhealthy kinds of bread. I can speak about that, but we can talk about that here later. But I remember when I was at the homeless shelter in Davenport, Iowa, they had like a whole, and this is, I've been to many other shelters, and this is the only single one I've ever been to where I've seen. And this was not even coming from like a kitchen. This was bagels, not just bagels, but it was a pile of bagels. And they didn't even just serve this from like a designated sanitary place, like a cafeteria or kitchen. They had these bagels piled up on the countertop by this sink. Okay. And I can remember when I was in Boulder, Colorado, you know, they're into drug use and drug dealing, and so there's a fair share of people there that look aged terribly as well. And I went to this homeless shelter in Boulder that's like east or northeast of a little bit northeast of Boulder, and they just built it at the time. I heard it cost like $5 million for that thing to be built brand new. That was back in the day, like around, I don't know, 15 years ago, give or take. And they would let some of the residents serve the food there. And And so one time this resident that was serving food, he put soap in the food. And so for that reason, I don't represent for Colorado either. And here in this town that I'm in now, Salt Lake City, they put because I've taken like a few different kinds of mental health medications. They're called psychotropic medications. There's this one kind of medication called Zyprexa. This off-brand name of it, this off-brand medication of that kind is called olanzapine, and that's for anger. Okay, so now they thought that just because I didn't see them put this in the food that I was not keen to the situation. Like I wouldn't know about what they did, because I know how these medications affect you. Okay, Zyprexa and Haldol make you restless, and they make you want to pace. Okay, because I was in Montana locked up there, and they would pull the same ass shit. They would pull the same type shit, and they would this is called narcissistic abuse and reactive abuse. So they would put me in an environment and tell these washed up like drug dealers and whatnot to try to get a rise out of me. This is also called reactive abuse. And so these people, they were sent by the authorities, were sent to get a reaction out of me, to get me angry. So then when I would get angry, they would justify it in their own mind, which is no justification. There's no justification trying to force anybody to take meds under any circumstances at all. And so they would send these people to get me angry, and then when I would react and get angry, then they would justify in their own mind giving me a pill which is for anger, and then they would treat me like a guinea pig and see if it's working. And then they would try to, especially try to push my buttons after that to see if I would get angry after they gave me that pill for anger. So that's what they did here in Salt Lake City. They started playing annoying music at a high volume when we're eating lunch or dinner. And then I tell them to turn it down nicely, which is what assertiveness is, speaking any concern in a non-intimidating way. And then they just ignore me. And so I realized being nice didn't work, so I started to get rude with them, as that scene on Titanic goes. And then there's some overweight dude. We have an exchange of words back and forth, me and this overweight dude. And I've seen these people motherfuckers try to pick a fight with me before. These Cartmans off of South Park. And so me and him get into it verbally, and then this dude gets out of his seat. Motherfucker looks like he's got fucking Down syndrome or something. Starts to get in my face. He's being aggressive towards me. You know what I'm saying? And I know how to win any domestic violence situation that you throw at me. Even if I have to fight dirty, I'll straight up lie and I'll be vague, and I'll say, we had a verbal altercation. This dude was aggressive towards me, and so that's why I did what I did, whatever it was, back to him. Okay, so now I was on a light rail train going from Santa Monica, California to downtown LA on that light rail train, and some dude, some young buck starts making all kinds of noise, and I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up, man. And then I tell him, man, get the fuck out of here, and he gets off the train at the next stop. And then me and this one tall dude get into it. This the police get called, and they show up, and they get both sides of the story. And I say, listen, man, this dude got out of his seat and hit my forearm, lightly on my forearm, and you can check the cameras. And they were like, well, we don't even check the cameras. So yeah, now at the homeless shelter they do check cameras, from my experience, but anyway, so he gets up in my face. He won't back off, and he pushes the table. And so I fucking did this move that somebody did on me in jail. I put my right foot in behind his left leg, and put this cross up and shove him on his ass like a fucking ram. And so that's why we don't represent for Salt Lake City either. Bye for now.